Hi everyone, and welcome to this first edition of Pondys Tache. What we hope to do is just have a light-hearted blether about either current topics or just anything involved in the sport. You know, the old days, which suits me to a T because I don't know that much about the new days, current stuff. So the quicker we get to the old stuff, the better for me. Who we've got today? We've got James Downey, who is one of Yorkshire's finest photographers, so he claims. And we have John Skultalk, who does his own video blogs as well on Twitter. You can find him on Twitter. And we have Dave Welford, who has one of the most popular Facebook pages. I think it's nearly 19,000 members you've got on there now, Dave.
Getting there, yeah.
Yeah, good. So anyway, before we start this, I've got to do the advertising bit, I'm afraid. And it's a big thank you to scottishgritting.com. So I think what we'll do today is we'll start off with Croatia Rally. And we'll go straight to you, Dave, actually. Was it a welcome addition to the WRC?
Yeah, I think it was not a bad effort on the first WRC event. The drivers were complaining of slippy roads and the tyre choice was pretty crucial, I think. Hence all the offs we saw on the event. There was a lot of hype made about Kalle Rovanperä being championship leader for the first time at such a young age. And I don't know what you guys think, but do you think the fact that he went off on the first stage was the lack of experience of leading a rally for the first time?
John?
I think maybe a little bit, and I think maybe the expectation on him is still a little bit high, especially on tarmac. I mean, he's from Finland, isn't he? So gravel is his thing, and I think maybe people are expecting a bit too much from him. I think they did in the Arctic rally as well. I think he needs a bit of time, and I think a lot of the drivers, when they think of tarmac at world level, are kind of used to smooth, you know, Southern France style events. Whereas that to me looked a bit more like an Irish tarmac event, you know, a bit rough, a bit slippier.
Yourself, James?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, certainly Rovanperä's case, he looked like it sort of got to him a little bit in that he wasn't sort of ready for, you know, the conditions, and it just looked like a sort of fairly sort of straightforward accident. But obviously, Ogier nearly did the same thing in the same corner, so there's something in the conditions of the road and something that they weren't used to, and it's obviously all new to everybody. But I think as far as the rally itself goes, I think it looked great, to be honest. I think it will be hopefully be back, and looked really picturesque, really nice looking stages. Obviously a challenge, you know, and it provided a great rally at the end, didn't it?
Absolutely. I think for me, when I listened to Kalle getting interviewed, he said that the car had been understeering all the way to the crash. So I'm wondering why he went so quickly when the car was understeering like that, you know. So I think there's just needs to temper his exuberance a little bit, you know. For me, you mentioned the roads. I thought there was a bit of Germany in there, a bit of Spain, a bit of Corsica. It was fantastic, you know. And what did you think of the actual coverage of the event? Is that with you, James?
Well, I think the highlight package I watched on ITV4, it did seem to be sort of very, very dominated by the sort of two main teams. You barely saw any Fords, did you, in it, I noticed? You know, in Formo, a brilliant drive, wasn't it? And it was barely touched upon. It did seem to me like they were kind of just focusing on the sort of, you know, leading three drivers rather a lot, which is great. Obviously, we want to know what's happening at the front, and it is the main story. But I like to sort of see the sort of sub stories myself. So I think the coverage itself on that particular package, you know, it could have sort of added a bit more to it, really.
I totally agree with you, James. But I think this isn't new to the sport. I think we've been getting a lot of this for years now. What's your thoughts on that, John?
How long have you got?
We'll just go get a cup of tea.
Yeah, well, I've done videos about this already. It's one of my biggest with the coverage at the moment. It's so formulaic, and it's just like, yeah, it's just top three cars, and I don't know. I think there's too much focus on where people are in the order, which I kind of you need to tell people the results, but I think you also need a bit of the story. I think I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, sorry, but I'll keep it quick.
Well done.
My fiance she kind of likes cars, but she's not interested in motorsport at all. Watching a Formula One race for her is the most boring thing you could ever make her do. But we started watching that Netflix series, Drive to Survive. I don't know if any of you have seen it, and she's absolutely hooked on it. Because rather than just watching cars going around in circles, they're talking about the human story and how everything that's going on behind it. And I think rally coverage really lacks that. I always think if you look at some of the drivers, Craig Breen's a really good one because he always shows a bit of emotion. And I think Jari-Matti Latvala was quite good for that, but we never really see it. So it's just, I think, and if you watch all live as well, it's just lots and lots of cars on the stages, but you never really hear anything about what's happening. And yeah, you never see what's going on lower down the order. You might get a little bit of who's leading WRC2, but that's about it. I think they're missing a trick somehow. And I don't think, how can you pull people in if I think sport for me, and some people will disagree, sport for me is about the human story, and you never see that in WRC coverage. I think that.
I think I'd agree. Yeah, I mean, it's to me. You got WRC2, WRC3, and a big thing's been made about it as a sort of stepping stone thing, but it literally got about 10 seconds of coverage, didn't it, in the highlights package, and it needs to sort of explain that to viewers and people who aren't sort of stalwarts of rallying for sort of 20 years, people that don't see that. And then, because I think the entry on it's great this year. It's some great drives and great talent in there. It needs to be sort of shown a bit more, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Dave?
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. I mean, they don't cram enough into that hour program that they get. And if you think back to the old Top Gear rally reports, it used to be on for 20 minutes, and you'd know about people that were at the back of the field, how they got to the event, and you'd follow the progress. It does need that other element of rallying, the privateers, what people go through to get to an event. It's not just, your top manufacturers that are there. And I think WRC it's going down this sort of wormhole where it's trying to be like Formula One. It's its own unique sport where it's beyond your wildest dreams to get to that level really now. None of the national championships run cars to the same specification anymore. It just seems so alien now from the rest of rallying. So yeah, I think they need to work on the coverage really and some other things as well.
I could seriously talk all night about this, I absolutely agree with John about the human angle. The thing is, how do you cram it into that time? For me as well, I've got issues with the whole coverage of rallying these days. I'm going to put my hands up. Tarmac rallying is really boring me now, okay, because I think the cars are so much like racing cars on tarmac. If a car steps out just a tiny bit, there, oh my God, did you see that? He stepped out, and I'm thinking, rally cars step out all the time.
It's supposed to.
Years ago, they've always stepped out. That's what's made it different from racing. The controlled slides, and we just don't get that. I think cars are so well engineered now, and tyres are incredible. It's lost a bit of its spectacle for me. As I say, I could talk about the coverage. For a start, I'm fed up with in-car camera. It's just constant, and this must be a money-saving exercise. In-car camera and helicopter shots. You very rarely get a side stage shot, unless it's
I noted that. And drones as well will change that even further. Some
of the angles, I mean, you don't get actual much hardcore rallying on the programme. So I certainly don't want to see the side of a driver's head when he's driving. If you had stage side cameras, would give the viewer proper element of the speed, because you just do not get that from the eye in the sky and in car, in my opinion. Especially camera.
Yeah, definitely. I always think back to watching Irish Tarmac, always sticks in my mind. Bertie Fisher in the Subaru, this sort of thing as well. Stand up a minute.
Yeah,
Actually,
you could see it. Stage side cameras, especially, you could see the speed and you could see the car moving around under braking. It made a big difference to the perception of speed for the viewer. I think big difference.
it's funny you said that because I just watched the I think it was a '96 Corsica back then, and the Evos and the Subarus are twitching all over the place coming up the corners. You just don't see any of that now. It's so well engineered, the cars, you know. You just do not see it.
I think the aerodynamics are a big factor in that with these WRC cars. They just never seem to sort of shift, either like BRF1 cars effectively.
The downforce is incredible.
Yeah.
But I think another issue is it's very difficult for any broadcaster to produce great rallying because it's fashionable just to say it's rubbish. I remember when what was it? WRC went to Channel 4, and Robbie Head, Penny Mallory, all that lot. I thought it was actually quite good. It got slated, you know, completely slated, but I thought it was quite good. Channel 4 had an obligation to attract new viewers, so they were doing the more human angle and all this kind of stuff. Whereas the new one, they're trying to pack the rallying in and just, like you say, there's no human angle anymore. It's just, they don't seem to need new viewers. They're just giving it to the hardcore.
Yeah.
I think back then as well, the Channel 4 days, it was easier to sell because obviously you had Burnsy and McRae at the front. So it didn't really matter what you were showing. You know, you knew you'd get the crowd because of those two guys. And, you know, we've had Elvin Evans at the top for the last couple of years now, and there's no, you wouldn't even know about it, would you, if you weren't a hardcore rally fan? It's diabolical, really.
When you're talking about Rally 2 and 3 earlier on, James, not getting any exposure, who would sponsor these guys when you're getting zero exposure?
Well, it's always catch-22, isn't it? You're not going to get sponsored without the exposure, and you know you're not going to get exposure without sponsorship. So it's someone's got to make the move somewhere, haven't they? And kind of, you know, take a risk on it. And I think it must be for me. It's got to be the people that are running the TV sort of angle. They've got to start showing it. I mean, Chris Ingram's just got this massive sponsorship deal, hasn't he? And I think his car got shown maybe once, didn't it? But his sponsors clearly have put the money in because they want to see that car get some exposure, haven't they? Well, obviously that's basically what sponsorship is, as we know. But it seems to me like they're not going to be getting their money's worth there.
Yeah,
which is a worry, isn't it?
It's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Someone has to front the money to pay for the coverage to get better. You know, otherwise it's not going to grow. You know, if you want to grow the fan base, you have to speculate to do that. And I think they don't seem to be willing to do that. And I think the all live coverage for me is quite good generally. I think that it could be improved, but having that behind a paywall for £10 a month, if you're, I know a lot of people that are quite willing to go to Rally GB because they've got a casual interest, but they're not going to pay £10 a month to watch every round on their phone. No way. So someone needs to put some money up and make it happen if they want to grow.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I believe Neuville's team paid the Belgian broadcasters to show rallying.
Right.
I read that a few years ago. So it's not just a British thing, you know.
Is it more down to the WRC promoter that kind of, you know, they're sort of taking the money from the main manufacturers, aren't they? So that dictates who gets shown. And I know some of the sort of companies we've got in this country that show sort of British rally, and I think that works the same way. Like the people that race at the championships pay for the TV coverage. You know, so for example, the BTRDA competitors, there's a certain amount of the registration fee, I think it goes towards the coverage that Special Stage, for example, produce.
Yeah, I think it's hard to accept that we're a minority sport. It's a fact.
Yeah.
We're just not wanted, sadly.
Yeah.
So moving on for the broadcasting thing. What about Ogier? What a performance. The guy is just a machine. I've got to admit that I kind of fell out of love with the WRC when Loeb was dominating. I don't think that was good for any sport, somebody dominating like that. And I just got a bit bored with it. I started watching WRC again a couple of years ago. And just Ogier is just incredible. You know, he really is. Neuville picking those softs on that one stage, let him in. And it was just, he was gone. You know, it was fantastic. I mean, there's nothing, I can't see him getting beat this year. You know, I think it takes us this year.
I think last year was probably the only chance he ever had of beating him before he retires, really. You know, he was learning the Toyota, and with it being such a mixed up schedule because of COVID, you know, they did some different rally events and had to cut down on the mileage and stuff. So that was the best chance, really. And I think this year it'll be an Ogier whitewash as we get momentum into the season. I don't know what you guys think personally about Evans. I still sort of feel like he's not champion material myself. I might get shot here, you know, I've been a British rally fan and that, but I just think when it comes to the crunch, you know, these last stage battles, he just hasn't got that killer instinct, and we've seen it a few times now where he makes mistakes, you know, when he going into that final stage and it's like a couple of seconds here or there. He's lost it 2 or 3 times now. I don't know what you guys feel about that.
I think I'd have to agree with you there. I think he's a good professional driver. You know, he's going to score points for the team, but like I say, he's not Ogier, is he? And, you know, he's just a straight battle over a season. He's not going to beat him.
No.
But let's forget, I mean, Evans is in the best cars ever had now as well. And, you know, he'll win a couple of rallies on tarmac, but he's not going to win the championship. It's just, I'm surprised he's got this fast. I didn't think he had it at all. But like, he's proved me wrong to that point. So, you know, all my hands up there. He's very good, but it's just not Ogier standard. But who is?
He's fantastic, Evans.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And the speeds now is incredible. But am I right in thinking he's only won 2 rallies?
Right.
Sweden,
He's won
GB, 3.
3, yeah.
Yeah, 3.
He seems to have been around forever now in the WRC.
Yeah.
You know, he's had a fair whack at it, you know.
Yeah, and he's come and gone a couple of times as well, hasn't he? Like Tanak.
Yeah.
I think that did make him, though, you know, when he went down to R5 and did the British Championship, I think that helped. And I think winning the British Championship is something he needed to do to progress again, you know, to get the maximum speed. And like James says, I think he's a worthy WRC event winner. I just don't think he's a champion in the making, to be honest.
I'm going to disagree with that a little bit. I think I agree with Dave on the point that he's not got that killer instinct yet. I think if you look at his progression over the last couple of seasons, I think in terms of speed, he's pretty much there. I think in terms of general consistency, he's pretty much there. He needs to, like you say, he needs to get that last little bit so that when it comes to the crunch on the last stage, if there's a handful of seconds, that he can put in the performance and keep the lead or take the lead. I think that might come. I think there's a bit of a jump for me between being quick enough to win a rally and consistently quick enough to win a championship. And I think he just needs, I think that will come with experience a little bit. I think he's been there a long time on and off, but I think being in Toyota is the first time we've seen him in a genuinely competitive car. And I think a little bit of time will give him that. I think we have to remember that next year Ogier is not going to be there, and that'll probably help him a bit as well. So I think once Ogier goes, I think for me, you lose the standout driver. I think if you look at Neuville, Tanak and Evans, I would say they're pretty much all on a level with each other. I think Ogier is just that step above all of them.
I would disagree with that, John. I would say that Tanak's ahead of everybody, apart from Ogier. Tanak on his day is blistering. Honestly, I mean, I think he's incredible. That his championship year was, and his finish at the weekend wasn't a bad finish. You know, and people are going, "What's wrong with Tanak?" Plenty of points in the bag again. I think he'll be there about at the end of the year, Tanak.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's not in the Toyota, and in the Toyota he's just absolutely smoked everyone, didn't he, for 2 years? It was only bad luck he didn't win the championship twice for me in the Toyota. He was the fastest driver both those years.
Mm-hmm.
So the Toyota's still the best car, isn't it? I think it's still so on tarmac at least. It's still a step beyond the Hyundai for me.
Yeah.
But Terry Neuville, I thought he was. I was going to say he was a star of the event because he was very fast out the blocks till that bad tyre choice, and even after that he was coming straight back, you know, and he overtook Elfyn. And what do you think?
Yeah,
who would you say? In fact, who would you say was the star of the rally?
I think he was. I think given the year he's had with the co-driver disaster, I think to be where he is and to be he's been on the podium every rally, hasn't it, so far? I think that's really impressive. I think he's having a really good year. I don't think it'll be enough because I think you're right. I think Ogier will win again, and I think Croatia, he was really good.
Yeah.
Move on. Sorry, Dave.
I was just going to say it was probably a rally that Neuville should have won. Really, I think those roads did suit him. You know, that like you were saying before, they're quite like Germany, maybe a bit like Ypres. So I think he probably had the advantage in that respect. But again, you know, it's these small mistakes like tyre choice and that where you won't ever stop Ogier. He'll never make a mistake like that. He's always there, and he can, even if he does make the wrong tyre choice, he'll still make the best of the situation, won't he?
Exactly. I think it was great just to see a new round as well. It was a level playing field for everybody. You know, it was quite interesting to watch how they developed over the weekend. So, shall we move on to our second topic now, chaps?
Okay.
Who is the best British driver ever, not including Messrs McRae or Burns? This could be controversial. I think we've drawn up a list of, is it 7? So we've got Jimmy McRae, Roger Clark, Tony Pond, Chris Meek, Elfyn Evans, Brooksy, and Wilson. We're happy with that list? Or should there be, before I carry on, there will be people watching this thinking, what about Vic Elford? Paddy Hopkirk. You know, Alistair McRae is a good shout. Even maybe Mark Higgins. But for me, we had to narrow it down. So is there anybody I've missed out, you think, on that list? Apart from the ones I've mentioned?
I think they're the main guys, really, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Right, who should we start with? Tony Pond.
Ooh.
You can start, Dave.
Well, yeah, Pondy's got it for me. I was going to say I'm a closet British Leyland fan, but it's, you know, I'm not a closet fan, as you can tell by the t-shirt there. He's just a class act, wasn't he, really? You know, all those, some say rubbish cars he drove and dragged great results out of them. It's surprising when you look through his results, and you know he wasn't even a British champion in that. But I think if you speak to any hardcore British rally fan, they'll say that he was above and beyond the rest at the time. You know, above Jimmy and Russell and that. His natural driving ability, you know, put him in any car, he could win a stage easy in it. And I just think he was the man, really. Maybe it was the power of the Tache, who knows? What do you guys think?
He certainly had the best Tache out of those gentlemen.
So, he had a better Tache than Jimmy McRae, that's for sure.
Definitely.
I think it's a tough one. You got to remember this topic is the best, not necessarily the fastest. I recently spoke to one of a navigator that sat beside both Tony and Jimmy. I'm not saying I'm going for Jimmy, but I'm just picking Jimmy as an example. And he said that Tony Pond was the faster, but Jimmy was far more consistent. So if you were a manufacturer, which one would you have in your team? Dave?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. And, you know, I think Jimmy was probably as good as Pondy, really. And I think for Jimmy, it was just that he got to rallying too late in his life, really. He probably could have made it into WRC. I don't know if he would have been an event winner as such, but, you know, what he did in the British Championship during the 80s, he dominated it, really, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Thoughts on Pondy?
I think one of the things that I thought about while I was thinking about the names, because the eras are so different, aren't they? The sport when he was doing it is so different to now. And I think one of the things that I tried to think about is who would fit into both eras. So if you look at the old days, you had to be quick, but you also had to be consistent and, you know, kind on the car to cover the distance. Nowadays, they're sprint events, so you have to just be really, really fast. And for me, I think Tony Pond is probably the one that would fit best into the modern era, because I think over a single stage, he's blinking quick. And I think that would put him in good stead for the sprint events. And I think the thing for me that stands out about him, other than his personality, the rally I remember, maybe because I'm a bit younger, isn't the 6R4s and all that stuff. I think it was the Ulster Rally in '93, and he was in a Metro GTI and he finished 10th overall or something ridiculous. That says a lot about his raw pace, doesn't it? So I think that for me, at that ability, the speed, I think for me elevates him a bit. You know, having the speed as well as the consistency. Would I have him as the best of ours? Maybe not, but
keep your one to yourself for now. James?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously he's up there, isn't he? You know, just certain results he had in WRC overseas events that in totally unsuitable cars. I think third overall in Corsica in '81 in a Datsun Violet. That's just incredible. You know, that's basically Lancia Stratos Renault 5 Turbo territory. So that car is just, that's immense. His downside, obviously, his career's changed a bit by a couple of high-profile sort of crashes on the RAC, one on the opening day, which is sad for him. But I think certainly, in terms of natural skill and ability, I think he's definitely, he probably is the best in that respect. And I think probably on tarmac, he's probably the best as well. I mean, I was lucky enough to sort of be at the Isle of Man in 1984. I got sort of taken on a family holidays as a sort of 10-year-old. So I did see him perform in that rover on that island, which is something that just sticks in my memory now as one of the best things I've ever seen. He was just awesome. You know, really threw it around in those tight lanes. Very tight sort of perfect car control on sort of tight hairpins and things. He was superb, and obviously he stepped into a four-wheel drive car and produced the goods in that as well, even though it wasn't the fastest four-wheel drive car. So I think he definitely deserves his right to be sort of mentioned in this debate, and he's definitely a contender for me.
I was actually at Knowsley the year he went off. I seen him crash the rover into the tree.
Right.
I think Dave made a great point about the cars he's driven. He's never really been a top line car. Even the Metro was.
Wait, careful now.
The Metro was possibly the second worst Group B car. I think what happened with the Metro is it peaked, didn't it, on RAC? It was never going to better that result. He was a national hero after that. It was incredible. Very fast on his day. Could probably, if it was the fastest driver ever in the British competitors, I think I'd probably say Pondy. I don't think he was the best. He was far too loyal to ARG and stuff. as well in British Leyland. You know, did he drive a Mark 1? Didn't he? Started off in a Mark 1, Dave? Is that right?
Yeah,
He
won the Mexico Challenge, I think, and then he got a works drive on a Scottish rally one year, RS 1600, and then I think Tony Fall snapped him up then from that in the Opals.
I think it's hard to talk about. It's strange talking about such an incredible driver who's had only a few great results.
Yeah, that's always struck me as odd as well. But I grew up sort of hearing about Pondy and his stage side antics and stuff. My dad was a massive fan of him. And, you know, you're just watching those videos, like the rally sprints, things like that, where he's whooping all the F1 drivers in maestros of all things. It's just incredible to watch, isn't it? And the other guys on the list, they just don't really have the excitement factor. Maybe Chris Meek to a degree, but Pondy was definitely the crowd favourite, I think.
I think one of the major pluses for Pondy was his personality. He was a joker. I don't know if you've seen that video that was released by General Motors with him and Jimmy. Two of them are just having a brilliant laugh all the way through it, and it's something we don't really see very often at all. I think Pondy was fantastic, much missed. I'm going to put my cards on the table and say he's not my best British driver. So there we go. So we move on.
You can be wrong. That's
been back to the 80s. So how about up to the present-ish? Chris Meek. Chris won the Intercontinental Championship in 2009.
Yeah.
I think he had 5 WRC wins.
The most of anyone.
I think to win the Thousand Lakes Rally, and anybody that calls it Rally Finland will be getting chucked off the screen. For a Brit to win that event is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was 82, Russell Brooks scored a 6th place finish over there in the Chevette, and the British motoring press went wild, saying what an amazing result, you know. How could he do that? It's the domain of the Scandinavians. So for somebody now to win that event, so specialised, I don't know if he got the praise he deserved, Chris. Really incredible result. I mean, imagine having that on your CV.
Yeah, if you're going to win one rally, you want it to be probably Finland, if not Monte Carlo.
Absolutely. So, James.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and he's up there for me as well. Just his stats say so for a start, don't they? He's won 5 WRC rallies. That's more than anybody else except the two in this debate. His outright speed is blinding. It was up there. He was up there as one of the fastest drivers, wasn't he? When he, you know, and to get 2 wins out of that Citroen, which obviously he had to drive beyond the limit to get any sort of performance at all out of it, and that's why he had so many accidents as well. Which obviously people are going to point to that, but he had the accidents because he was trying to win. You know, he could have finished 8th, but he didn't want that, did he? He's a win or bust driver, and he did win quite a few times. So for me, he's definitely he's also in the top 3, and so is Pond for me.
Okay, Ron.
I think for me, out of all of them, he is on a single stage, he would be the fastest. I think pure pace, he is, in my view, I would actually say probably one of the fastest drivers of the last decade or so. Maybe Auger and Loeb ahead of him, but I think apart from that, I can't really think of many that would beat him across a single stage. And yeah, as already been said, he's had more wins than anyone on our list. In the WRC, I think he's had more stage wins than anyone on the list. IRC champion, British junior champion, I think, as well. Super 1600 British champion as well. So stats-wise, what surprised me actually looking at the stats of all the drivers is just how high he was because of his reputation for rolling the car into a ball.
Yeah.
But his success rate is higher than I think a lot of people would give him credit for. And I think he was probably a victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think going to the mini team turned out to be a disaster because of politics. And I think he probably went to Citroën at the wrong time too, because Citroën wasn't the same team when he at the end of the Loeb era. I think they were, Volkswagen had obviously come along and were dominating, and I don't think Citroën were the same. And the new car, or the 2017 car, was a total disaster, wasn't it? So I think had he been in a better team earlier, if he joined Toyota, if it had been possible for him to join Toyota earlier, I think we might have seen him around for a bit longer and probably more wins.
I mean, you're absolutely correct to look at his record, the WRC wins and that. But is it fair to say that others on the list were maybe never afforded the opportunity in the WRC?
Oh yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that struck me about a lot of the drivers, perhaps apart from Elvin. A lot of them probably chances they deserved. I think you could say that an awful lot of British drivers.
That's what I mean by that is, so we can look at his record and see, well, he got 5 WRC wins, which is brilliant and more than anybody else on the list. A lot of people on the list weren't in full works teams doing the WRC. Yeah. So it's subjective, and this is why you can never be absolutely correct in this kind of debate. How about yourself, Dave?
Yeah, you're right. It's always hard to compare, different generations and eras. But Chris also, he didn't get into the WRC till quite late in his career. He was like 32, I think, when the mini thing came along. So by that time, you should really be fighting for championships already. And then obviously he ended up missing a couple of years, came back with Citroën on a bit program. So he never really had many full seasons either. So his performances, I think, are even more impressive on that respect. But it's that thing as well where he was a win or bin driver. And it's that choice. Do you push hard to win or show your speed? Or do you play it safe, more like Elfyn did in his early career, to make sure you get the finish? Or do you risk binning it and getting an angry manager every other weekend? It seems a lot tougher these days for drivers now. They can't seem to be allowed to make mistakes. And I think Chris really got reprimanded, for all of his accidents, and he got a bit of a reputation like his hero Colin. But I think, well, basically it was just that he came to the WRC too late and maybe he was pushing a bit too hard. But he's definitely quick enough to be a champion. I don't know if he would ever be consistent enough. But for me, he would definitely be in the top 3 anyway of the guys we're talking about.
What was your favourite Chris Meek moment, guys? James?
Got to be the Mexico one when he went through the car park and got back on to win it by a few seconds. I mean, it's a legendary performance just to find you out of the car park in time. I mean, great.
Finland, I think. It's got to be Finland for me.
For me, Colin Clark, little spat, end of the stage. Remember that, James?
I don't think I've seen that one. I've heard he got a little bit arsey with one or two reporters sometimes.
Very good. What about yourself, Dave? Favourite moment for me?
Mexico was definitely one of them. I was in Spain when he won his last event. That was pretty special to witness. And we were at the service area when he pulled in and did a big skid and everyone was cheering. So it'd be between those two, because I think Spain was a great win for him because it wasn't down to road position or anything else. It was just a pure flat out drive and he pretty much dominated that event.
What was his first win? Was it Argentina?
Yeah, 2015. I think it was the anniversary of that the other day, actually.
Well, I think that was one of my favourite moments because the human element came out. Somebody mentioned Breen earlier. The emotion. If you remember, Chris was upset.
Yes.
And loading it up to Colin, was great
Yeah,
to see.
I remember it.
He had a similar moment actually at the end of Catalonia when he won there. And they interviewed him at the end of the stage, and he was saying, "Oh, I can't believe I've won it. The last time I was here, it was like 17 years ago when Colin McRae won, and I, was at the finish with him in my Subaru jacket and all that. It was great to see."
Okay, shall we move on to our next contender? Let's go for Russell Brooks. Who wants to start? Well, John, you start, Russell.
Oh yeah. I struggled a little bit to look past the stats. So I think in terms of performances, his stats are, I think among the lowest, aren't they, of all of our drivers. That being said, I think there's one thing you have to remember Russell Brooks for, and that is his sponsorship deal with Andrews, which I think was one of the most successful in history, and probably created some of the most iconic cars of, or liveries at least. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of people would look past. I think it shows that sometimes there's more to being a great rally driver than just being quick. And I think a lot of other drivers have fallen foul of that and perhaps not got the opportunities because they couldn't talk to people and get the backing that they needed. So I think that's a big thing that always sticks in my mind with Russell Brooks. And I think the other thing that goes in his favour is probably the period when it was him and Jimmy fighting, trading wins and times, and I think they won British Championships one after the other, didn't they? And I think for me, he's perhaps not the best on the list in terms of his performances, but I think just the iconic kind of era and kind of the aura around that time of the sport, I think makes him, it elevates him, doesn't it?
I would have to disagree with you, John. His stats would outshine Pondy. For starting, two BRC wins, and what an era he did them. I think it was 77. He won the first one in the Escort. He won the Circuit of Ireland in a Chevette, which was not as competitive. I mean, he held on to the coattails of Penty in the 037 rally and beat him eventually. Well, Penty crashed and Brooksy took the win. He's won the New Zealand rally. I think it was 1978. I think my memory's going. First Ford to win. He gave Ford its first international win in the four-wheel drive Sierra. I think he's had 2 second places on REC, but definitely one. I would say they're better stats than Pondy.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I think he's another one that's went through this, not being in the best car. I mean, he had the Escort when he won the Scottish in 1976. That was when he elevated his career. And then, in fact, things could have really changed for Russell because he tried to, he'd actually signed a deal in 81 to drive the Quattro with Ingolstadt. And they phoned him up and says, well, it's not happening. And he never knew till his last day why he stopped. But I think in a Quattro, he'd imagine him against Mikkola in 81 and 82 in the BRC. They're fantastic. I think the word that I'd describe Brooksy is dogged. Doesn't matter what car he was in, 100%, and nobody that was beating him could absolutely relax. So
I think there was a saying at the time, Bob, if you're on the stage at the time, I know you would have been, that if his car had broken down, he would have carried it over the line on his back. He was that kind of determined, wasn't he? That was what I remember him for. I think you're right about the Andrews deal. That's like one of the most iconic sponsorship deals in British motorsport, which he himself worked really hard to bring and keep going. I think he even sort of, when he left Ford for the 1980 season and got the Sunbeam, that was like a privately run team, I believe, that he himself was also the manager of. So he dealt with kind of a driving, the manager stuff and the sponsorship. Didn't really work out for him, but I mean, to sort of go it alone like that, I think was quite a sort of brave thing. When he could have got sort of other deals, I'm sure. He then definitely didn't get the sort of chances on the overseas WRC scene that the one people on this list did get. And I think that's kind of something he was very unfortunate with. But his record on the RAC in that era, it's fantastic, wasn't it? Like you say, I think it's 1 second, 2 thirds, a fourth, a fifth, and 2 sixths or something like that, wasn't it? He's really was a consistent driver. But like you said, maybe he doesn't kind of quite capture the imagination phrase all out raw pace that some of the other ones do.
I think also the Manx fiasco, the Lovell in the Sierras didn't help his cause.
Not his fault, but
correct. It wasn't his fault. Lovell made it look like it was his fault.
Yeah.
And another time was Bertie Fisher. The same kind of thing happened with Bertie.
Yeah.
And Bertie was in the BMW. But my whole childhood grew up, it was Russell Brooks versus McRae. And he was just such a big part of rallying to me, he was such a small person. I was like a primary school kid getting out of the car, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, he was a tough cookie, wasn't he, Russell? He was a funny looking guy, he didn't look like a typical rally driver, but he had amazing stamina. And the old RAC that went on for like 5 days and all through the night and stuff, he seems to relish in that, didn't he? The longer, harder, the better for him. And like James was saying, the results speak for themselves on the RAC, but I just could never imagine him on the world rally scene. I don't know if it's just because he didn't really do it, so we can't look back at it, but I can't see him out there like Pondy. But yeah, his rivalry with Jimmy during the 80s is legendary and great to watch. And the Andrews deal and all those cars are iconic, like you say. But for me, I don't know. It just doesn't. I've never really thought of Russell as like one of the top Brits, which is strange, even though he's got all this success. Just doesn't really stick in my mind so much.
I think that year he got the Lancia. He went to Turin. He got the Lancia. It was at 87, 88?
87.
87, and he put it off the road. The car was not what he was hoping for. And I genuinely believe that he believed he could win the rally that year to elevate him. That just wasn't to be, So, okay, so Russell's not number one for any of us. So we'll go current again and we'll go for Elvin. What's on Elvin, John?
Oh, I get to go first. Obviously, I'm more of a modern person than I think some of my co-hosts, so I am quite a fan of Elvin. I think he's had it tough at times. Can't remember who it was that said earlier that he has gone for a kind of steadier approach than perhaps Chris Meek did, and I think at times that has maybe hurt him a little bit, because I think maybe people have seen that he hasn't, or thought that he hasn't got the raw pace. However, again, if you look at the stats, 3 wins now. I think that'll be more. 14, I think, podiums he's on now, quite a lot. A lot of stage wins. And I just, below, so I've written some things down here. He was British champion, obviously, in 2016 when he was demoted. Junior champion in 2010. WRC Academy winner 2012. R2 British champion in 2012 as well. First Rally GB winner since Richard Burns. So I think, he's got, I think he's got quite a lot of success already. I think, he's still relatively young, isn't he? I think he's still got 5, 6, 7, 8 years maybe in the championship still if he plays his cards right. So I think he's got a lot that he could still achieve, especially looking ahead when OJ is going to be gone. So I think from that point of view, I think he could go on to be the best Brit ever, including the 2 that we're not talking about, potentially. He just, as we talked about at the very beginning, I'm getting some funny faces there, he just needs to nail that. Just needs to find that killer instinct. And if he can find that, I think, well, I mean, if he wins one world championship, he's put himself on a level with the very best, doesn't he? So I think for me, he's not there yet, but I think he could be there.
Do you not think by now, though, that he should be, really?
I think he has a more measured approach than some of the others. I think he is, and I think, well, I mean, you go back to the killer instinct thing a little bit, don't you? I think sometimes he is maybe a little bit more risk averse than he should be. And I think if he wants to make that step up, he's going to have to start taking some of those risks. So I think that over the next season or two, I think is going to be the thing that defines his, don't want to use the word legacy, but legacy.
Fair enough.
Just to go, James.
Sorry, I was saying, he's unique on this list in that he's actually still competing, so he has got power to add to his achievements, hasn't he? So for this debate in, say, 5 years' time, he could well be a double world champion or something. So, you know, as yet,
it could have all gone wrong, and I could be proven to have been miles off.
As yet, we just don't know with him, do you? To me, it surprised me that he's even got this good, because I didn't think he had it a couple of years ago. I thought it was going to be an also run.
I've not actually got much to say about Elfyn, because he's currently doing it, and he will get better. But any Brit that wins a WRC event is fantastic. You know, I'll always be up there. I just think time will tell with Elfyn. For me, he's nowhere. He's not one or two at the moment. For me, it's that simple.
Yeah, he's not in the top three for me, but I'm afraid. I've already made my feelings quite clear, I think, but I just think he needs to show his hand now. You know, John's saying that Auger is obviously going to be retiring soon, so then obviously he's got a good chance. But I think Kalle Rovanperä, once he's got the experience, I think Kalle's going to be your next champion after this phase is over. And yeah, I think he should be doing a bit more now already, to be honest.
I think that's a great analogy. Kalle's he's upcoming hot shot, and it'll not be long before he wins rallies. You know, and put more pressure on Elfyn. We'll see. So, okay, moving on. We'll go back in time again. How about Roger Clark? Now, what a CV. Who wants to go first? Dave.
Yeah, Roger's in the top three for me, definitely. You can't ignore what he achieved. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult going off the success because it was some of it's before the WRC existed. But, you know, he dominated British rallying at that time. He won events like the Acropolis back in the 60s, and he won Circuit of Ireland 4 times, which was one of the hardest rallies in the world ever. And, you know, he was the benchmark for any British driver at that point. And obviously Ford put their faith in him. And apparently, as long as Roger was driving for Ford, they were never going to take on another British driver, which is why people like Russell sort of lost out a bit on the World Championship. But yeah, just an incredible driver, really, Roger.
He's got amazing stats, really. I mean, 5 times he won the Scottish Rally. Back then, the Scottish Rally was WRC level. It's fantastic, you know. So used to get a lot of foreign drivers coming over there. And apart from, I think, Mikkola, 73, something like that, was it 73? 73, I think. Roger's Scottish record is incredible. It really is. It was such a tough rally. He's obviously won the REC twice. 72 and 76. I think he was a bit fortunate in 76. I think Penty had it in the bag, I think. But yeah, doesn't matter. He still won the rally. So I mean, he was 15 years before, I think, as a works driver. That's incredible. And you mentioned the Acropolis. He also won the Tulip Rally, and he won the Cyprus twice. He's got incredible stats. I think he changed the perception of rallying in the UK, made it more professional. and obviously his 72 RAC win brought rallying to the forefront of British sport. So is he in my top 2? Absolutely not.
Ooh.
Wait a minute. Is it my top 2? Oh, it should be really. I'm going to come back to that one. John, take it away.
Yeah, he's right up there, isn't he? There's no, you can't say he's not. I think with Roger, you have to have a bit of context, don't you? Because the World Championship for drivers wasn't the same when he, in his early years. But so while he doesn't necessarily have the World Championship wins, I think you have to remember that the British Championship, when he was doing it, I mean, was like you said, Bob, it was a World Championship level series, wasn't it, at that time? The amount of international driving coming over. So for him to be in that, as competitive as he was and as successful as he was, puts him right up there, doesn't it? I think the stats don't quite demonstrate that necessarily. So I think that, for me, I mean, yeah, the number of times he won Scottish Circuit of Ireland. I think I read somewhere he had 40 national and international wins or something, a huge number. So, massively successful. And one thing as well that I noticed is just how long he was driving for. Started in the 60s, and his last run in the British Championship, I think, was 95. I think I found in a Subaru.
Yeah,
incredible career to be competing at that level. Incredible. So, I am going to put my cards on the table. He's right up there for me, top 2 for sure.
I was lucky. I remember I watched him. I saw him in the Porsche in '84, the Authors Porsche, and obviously the National Series in the Metro. But by this time he was at the end of his career. It was a privilege to see Roger Clark rallying, I'm going to put him in my top 2.
good man.
I'm going to put him in my top 2. I was shamed into it. Have you had a shot, James, at this one?
Yeah, I think he's got to be up there, hasn't he? It's difficult to make a case against him, really. The thing I think perhaps say is that rallies were different then, and you could win him without being the fastest driver necessarily. He won a lot of his rallies by judging the pace superbly, from memory. That 76 RAC win, Penty stormed off, broke the car, didn't he? So Roger cleaned up at the end. And that was kind of typical of a lot of his wins. He did play the tortoise to the hair quite a lot of times, and it was very successful. But would he have the out-and-out pace to win the rally these days? Maybe not. But to me, one of the things I kind of love sort of to see, if you watch the old video clips, you can see what a smooth driver he was. The techniques, the way he just take a hairpin in the Escort, it's perfection. I think just things like that for me put Roger up. It was just so efficient, and like yourself, I didn't really see him until he was right at the end of his career. And I think I saw him in the Porsche 84 and in the RED Sierra a couple of times, about 85, and the 6R4 in 87. And he still pulled out some great results, even though he was kind of really knocking on by then. But you say for just sheer achievement and just being such a clever driver, I just think he's got to be there. Yeah, definitely top 3, possibly higher.
Okay, that's us all done, Roger, isn't it?
I think so,
yeah. Right, so Malcolm Wilson. Now I'm going to put my cards on the table right away. Malcolm Wilson's in my top 7. Yeah. I think stats-wise, he won the national championship, I think. He was fantastic in the Audi 85. The 6R4. I mean, I remember he come to the Scottish in 86, and he just destroyed Jimmy, all these folk. But he had the works car. And he's finished 3rd in New Zealand, I think, in 89 in the Astra. He won the BRC 94.
Yeah, 94.
I would suggest he didn't have much opposition there.
Nope.
Stephen Finlay maybe, and
Yeah.
I think, in fact, he finished third in REC, didn't he, on 93, the snowy one. That was a great result for him, you know. I still think he's very much deserving a place in this list. He's not in my top 3, but I think he's very, very fast on his day. Drummond Hill, I interviewed him, went down to Hurrenby Hall and interviewed him, and it was just terrific listening to him, talking about Drummond Hill, for example. You know, nobody could touch him. The 15-mile stage, and just nobody. The WRC boys could have came over, they wouldn't have got near him. It was incredible. So he's not in my top 3. Great driver. James.
I think in terms of WRC opportunities transferred to results, is probably 7th on the list. He did have a lot of chances in the 6R4 and a lot of chances with Ford, and didn't ever look like winning a WRC event, did he really? That said, to make a case for him, I think you've got to take into account the awful action that he had back in 1980. I think prior to that, he was up there, he was challenging the Finns in the Escort, but he did have a horrendous accident and he broke both legs, didn't he? And I don't think he was ever quite the same driver after that myself. Great as he was in the Quattro, but it was a Quattro.
Although you could argue he beat Michel hands down in the Sport Quattro on events.
Yeah. Blind events that kind of he probably knew better than she did.
Great point.
Yeah.
And he was a bit of a specialist of the Scottish rally, like you were saying. I think that was his favourite rally of all time. He just he seemed to really enjoy those stages. Yeah, he had some good performances in the Quattro. I met him in 2016 at the Pirelli rally. He was there because he just had some surgery on his ankles as a result of that crash all those years ago. And I actually asked him, I was like, do you think that's affected your career? And he was like, yeah, I think it did in the end. I think it affected his stamina over the longer events. But like James was saying, I don't think he ever really showed the promise of winning an event when he was in one, in a WRC event. And he said himself a few times, his greatest achievements have come being a team manager now. He's much prouder of that. And, he has done an amazing job with M Sport. There's no doubt. So for me, I'd say he was probably bottom of this list, but we'll never know because of the accident what he might have done really. So might be unfair to judge him on that, but
yeah, I think he was terrific. I think he was leading Sweden in the Escort Cosworth. I think he rolled it. I think that was his best ever showing. Ron?
Yeah, I think I would probably agree about his position towards the bottom of the list. I think for me, his achievements have been out of the car, not in it, perhaps. I think he was a very good British Championship driver. I think, as someone said on the blind events, I think he used that to his advantage. Very, very fast. Some people have told me that he was hard on cars, and that was part of his issue. Don't know how true that is, but I think, his influence on rallying, I think, has been massive for me personally, because I think the Michelin Pilot Escort Cosworth is one of the iconic liveries. But everything he achieved with Ford by taking on the works team, by building the business he's created, and winning the recent championships with the Fiesta and all that is incredible. And I think, far surpasses anything that he achieved behind the wheel of a car for me. And yeah, I think, I think, as you said, British Championship, when he won that, Stephen Finlay was a very good driver. But don't know if he was interested enough to make it. Well, he wasn't interested enough to make a career out of it because he gave up, didn't he? But I think, by the time Malcolm won it, Burnsy had moved on, McRae had moved on. So I don't think there was perhaps the level, and the championship was kind of moving away from those cars when he won it, wasn't he? He was moving towards the two-wheel drive cars. So, winning a British championship is still winning a British championship. You can't take that away from him. But I think, for me, I think he's probably towards the bottom of this list. I think I would probably have him at the bottom. But I don't think, saying that, his influence on the sport more widely has just been massive.
Just in a one-word answer, who would you have given the second after Pond? The man with the majestic moustache. Who would you have given the second 6R4 drive to if you were ARG back then in '85? Given that it had to be a British team, remember.
I think at the time Malcolm was the right choice. They were going off what he did that year in the British Championship with the Audi, and he was on a roll. I don't think Llewellyn had enough experience at that point. Jimmy McRae hadn't driven four-wheel drive before that at that point. So Malcolm was probably the right choice at that time. But another if and but would be if Group B continued going forward, would they have stuck with Malcolm, or would they have gone Llewellyn?
Well, that was actually 763 words instead of one. What about you, John? One word.
Oh, one word. That's a really tough question, and I'm not enough of an expert on 80s rallying to have a great opinion. Yeah, I think Llewellyn was became a star at the end of the 80s, so maybe he was worth a punt. Someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson's star was on the rise at that time, so I can see what they're going to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I could understand why they gave it to Wilson. And the only thing that stopped Jimmy getting it was his lack of four-wheel drive. Good point, Dave. James?
Yeah, I've got to agree. Wilson was the right choice at the time. He was younger than Jimmy, younger than Russell, but still had some experience. Llewellyn too young at the time, so there weren't any other British drivers around that would have been capable, would there? So after Pond, it had to be Wilson for the other one.
Okay, shall we move on to I've got one left. James McRae.
I've heard of him.
Who wants to start on James? John.
Oh, why did you come to me? I remember, actually, I'm too young for this, but I do remember Jimmy McRae being used to advertise Fords when I was a kid in the early, must have been the early to mid 90s, which I think showed how big a star he was. So someone, I can't remember who said this earlier, I think he started too late, didn't he? He started when he was 31 or something, didn't he? So I think that really hampered him on the world scene. You know, he was just too old to perhaps get the opportunities that he deserved. But I mean, in British Championship terms, was it 5 times he won it? I mean, that's in that era when the drivers he was against to win it 5 times is something. And again, like Roger Clark, you've got to look at the longevity. I mean, he's still doing Rally GB occasionally, isn't he? Even in the last few years, and he's late 70s. So I think a very successful driver, but I think a bit like Russell Brooks is being part of that era, isn't it? That makes him such a star. As we said right at the start, being the best doesn't necessarily mean being the guy that's won the most.
Mm-hmm. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, as well, I sort of missed the Jimmy era, so I can only really go off what I've been watching on videos all these years. You know, he dominated British rallying for so long, but like I said before, you know, he did come to it too late. And him and Russell are very even, I would say. And weirdly, they don't make it into my top 3, even though they're probably the most successful, you know, with victories and championships on the list. but he definitely had natural ability, very smooth driver. But when your son's Colin McRae, you might get overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was it towards the end of his time, wasn't it? You know, even in the late 80s. I mean, Colin was just unbelievably quick. And I think, that maybe that goes against Jimmy's career. I think he realised that Colin was super special, didn't he? And, I think maybe decided to focus a bit more on that.
Well, he did basically give up his own drive with Ford, didn't he? The Shell Gemini Cosworth to give it to Colin, because they fund one season, I think, couldn't they? So they stood aside to sort of concentrate on Collins, because I think he was sort of 44, 45 by then. So he had a good go at it. Great driver, superb tarmac driver, and again, superb sort of tactician on the longer events. Didn't get many opportunities in ultra competitive cars, and when he did, it kind of seemed to have sort of unlucky. He get to go in the GT4 on the RAC one year, Toyota GT4, but it broke down on the first stage or something, didn't it? So he his sort of chance gone. I find it very difficult to split him from sort of Brooks and Pond, to be honest. The kind of sort of equal third, if you know what I mean. Yeah, great driver. Probably, as has been touched upon, he came into rallying at 31, so by the time he got a works drives into his mid-30s, but still a great driver into his 40s. And obviously, he's the father of Colin Alistair McRae, so he deserves plenty of kind of kudos points for that, doesn't he, really?
Is in your top three?
No.
No, okay.
He's fourth.
Jimmy's stats are fantastic. They really are. 7 times he won the Circuit Island, beating the likes of Vatanen.
Yeah.
And a head-to-head with Vatanen in the Escort, Rotham's Escort. Jimmy beat him in the Chevette. This was a year before Vatanen went and won the World Championship. 5 times he's won the BRC. This was when the BRC was fantastic. Fantastic. He's won Ypres. I think it was 88. He went over.
Yeah.
He beat Snyers, Bruno Sabe in the Lancia, Works Lancia.
Yeah.
On in the home ground. He beat all the Belgians and everything. Well, 2 third places in RAC in cars that should never have finished in third place. That was Sarah Cosworth in 87, and the Manta in 83, when he was teammate to Toivonen and Vatanen. I think he's definitely top 3 material. He just started too late. I think very much stats for him. 4th in Greece, the Gallant, I think.
He did weird stuff at international level, did he? Because he did a few in Australia as well, didn't he? Did a few events in Australia as well, didn't he? I think when I was little, I can't remember.
Australia and New Zealand, didn't he? Definitely.
I think he holds the record for going the furthest miles to an event and retiring on the first stage or something. He went to New Zealand in 88, and I think he just broke down after the start.
Got some big accidents, Jimmy. Huge accidents. Epping, I think it was 82.
Oh, yeah.
He had one in the Colin McRae stages. I think it was a Porsche. He rolled off a mountain, basically. Just incredible. But he's definitely in my top 3. So I think that's all the drivers. Sorry?
Is that because he's Scottish?
I think, honestly, he was faster than Brooks. I don't see the similarity. I do see the similarity, but I think there's a level above a level each there for them, and Brooks is below Jimmy. So I think it's time to see who's we've got as our 1-2s. Games, your second place.
Second place, I'm going for Chris Meek.
First, dun dun dun.
First, Clark.
Okay. John.
Second place is really hard because I really want to put Elf in there, but I can't do it. It's not finished yet. I think second spot for me was almost a three-way tie between Elfin, Meek, and McRae, but I'm gonna go McRae because of
As well.
I just think he's legend. Top spot is Clark. I think that was an easy one for me in here.
And Dave. I wonder who you're going to pick as number one.
Well, number two is old school, so Roger Clark. And number one's Malcolm Wilson. No, Tony Pond.
Put that off now. Put the thing off.
Yeah, Tony Pond.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to say number two. A tough one. I was swithering between Chris Meek and Roger Clark. And I'm going to pick Roger. Okay. The number one driver ever, Britain, apart from Colin and Richard, Jimmy McRae.
Oh, where does that leave things then? Who got the most votes?
Yeah,
It's third place in a tiebreaker, is it?
Put it this way.
Pond would have been my third place, by the way.
In the list, in different positions and that, Clark is mentioned the most. 4 times. In fact, everybody put Clark in their 1-2. So, I don't know. These are all wrong. It's Jimmy. Anyway, guys, I think it's about time to wrap this up. I know that Dave and James, you've probably got whippets to walk in Yorkshire tonight or something. I don't know. And
more beer for me.
I was where's your flat
Can I
caps?
start a beer later?
You've not got. I was expecting flat caps and everything, you guys. You know. Anyway.
No.
So everybody, thanks for watching tonight, and we'll be back soon. And once again, thank you very much to scottishgritting.com, and we'll see you soon with a brand new video. Goodbye for now.